Hi, my name's Eric, and I'll be reading you selections from this week's Falmouth Enterprise, dated today, Friday, December 5th of 2025. And that date's important because we'll repeat this reading through Tuesday of next week. And because many of our listeners enjoy hearing it on the day of publication, which is Friday, then the weather forecast is relevant. This afternoon, there'll be increasing clouds. At night, mostly cloudy, a chance of a wintry mix. The high will be 36, a low around 30. Tomorrow during the day, mostly cloudy, chance of rain. The high will be 44. At night on Saturday, partly cloudy with a chance of rain, a low around 33. The extended forecast for Sunday calls for mostly sunny during the day, mostly cloudy at night, with a high of 42 and a low of 24. And there are many meetings scheduled for next week. Economic Development Industrial Corporation meets Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. in the Chamber office. The school committee meets Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. in the high school. The planning board meets Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. in the town hall. Library trustees meet Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. in the library with a Zoom option. The Solid Waste Advisory Committee meets Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the town hall. The Energy Committee meets Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. in the town hall. Beach Committee meets Wednesday at 6 p.m. at the Gus Canty Community Center. The Recreation Committee meets Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the Gus Canty Community Center. The Conservation Commission meets Wednesday at 7 p.m. via Zoom. The Affordable Housing Committee meets Thursday at 4 p.m. at the Town Hall. And the Zoning Board meets Thursday at 6 p.m. in the Town Hall. Back to the front page, the headline above the fold, Select Board supports targeted approach to protect Surf Drive. This is written by Lynn Hutchinson. Beach Committee Chairwoman Barbara Schneider broke into cheers and applause on Monday night, December 1st, when the Select Board voted to move forward with a targeted renourishment plan for Surf Drive. Action, she shouted from the back row of the audience section of the Select Board room in Town Hall. For years, the Beach Committee has pressed the town to confront the growing risks posed by the increasing frequency and intensity of coastal storms. Schneider's celebration came only after what Select Board Vice Chairwoman Heather Goldstone called a dose of reality, a sobering presentation that spelled out the urgent need to protect one of the town's most vulnerable stretches of coastline. The board's decision followed the detailed Surf Drive Beach and Dune Nourishment feasibility study that modeled how various methods for protecting the coastline would perform in a storm comparable to the January 13, 2024 5-year storm. The findings made one thing clear: there's no intervention that will guarantee Surf Drive's long-term survival. It's just Mother Nature, Goldstone said. You can roll the dice and end up with 2 5-year storms in 2 years, and anything bigger than that is what really scares me. The town hired Woods Hole Group to conduct a beach and dune nourishment feasibility study in November of 2024, and that work was concluded this past summer. The study examined ways to combat beach erosion, lessen wave overtopping, protect public and private infrastructure like roads and homes, support native vegetation and shorebirds, and enhance natural and recreational resources. However, future work faces significant limitations. Coastal scientist Connor Ofshun of the Woods Hole Group told the Select Board that the site's physical and ecological limitations significantly narrow what can be done there. The topography is extremely low, and only about 100 feet separate the high tide line from the roadway, leaving little room for nourishment or dune expansion. Much of the shoreline is also classified as sensitive habitat for species such as the least tern and piping plover, as well as native plants like sea beach knotweed and salt pond pennywort. These conditions result in strict natural heritage regulations that dictate how, when, and where any nourishment work can take place, Ofshun said. Offshore, healthy eelgrass beds line the length of the shoreline. While these underwater meadows contribute to shoreline stability, they also impose additional restrictions. The Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries prohibits nourishment within 50 feet of eelgrass, cutting the workable beach area by half. With rising seas and more frequent storms, mitigation efforts will need to be taken to protect town assets. Ofshun presented 4 options to the Select Board: taking no action, restoring dunes along the full 1.5-mile studied area, focusing work on the most vulnerable portions, or pairing dune restoration with a phased retreat of Surf Drive, beginning with removal of the seaward travel lane and eventually both lanes while maintaining off-road access for beachfront homeowners. For each mitigation strategy, Woods Hole Group modeled the effectiveness against a 5-year storm. If the town took no action, a storm of this magnitude would likely erode the beach further and compromise Surf Drive. However, if the town chose to build up the dunes, the road would likely be protected, but severe erosion of the beach and dunes would continue. If the seaward lane of Surf Drive is removed, it would result in an increase in dune width. Erosion under this approach would be minor compared to the other strategies, and Surf Drive would likely be protected. In all cases, reconstruction would be necessary, Option said. The outlook became even more alarming when researchers evaluated the impact of a 20-year storm. Under those conditions, all 4 options would fail. We're unlikely to be able to protect ourselves in a 20-year storm, Option said, adding that the cost and damages could be more than $25 million. Utilities like water main, gas, and electricity run under Surf Drive, and they would be compromised. According to Woods Hole Group's preliminary cost estimates, it could cost $2.96 million to build up the dunes along the whole 1.5-mile stretch of the studied area of Surf Drive, $1.475 million for targeted dune renourishment, and $6.06 million for the partial retreat from Surf Drive. However, the $6.06 million does not include any cost consideration related to relocating utilities that are under the road. The recommendation by Woods Hole Group is to pursue targeted improvements. This approach, Option said, is the most feasible to permit, cost-effective, and it offers the best storm protection by helping the area withstand severe weather with less potential damage. It also likely minimizes complications with property owners since it focuses on specific problem areas. Most properties that sit directly on the beach are within the widest section of the shoreline, therefore would not require immediate attention. Joshua K. Wrigley, the town's new coastal resilience specialist, made the same recommendation. Wrigley describes Surf Drive as a high-value asset with economic and cultural importance to the town, serving as a main road connecting Woods Hole to the rest of Falmouth. Having acknowledged the value of the Surf Drive area, a policy of target nourishment would preserve and protect those attributes, Wrigley said. Nourishment efforts would strengthen low-elevation coastal dunes, especially between Oyster Pond Road and Salt Pond Channel. Congruent with these nourishment efforts, Coastal Resilience will work with the Water and Wastewater Division to advance planning efforts that address the utilities below Surf Drive, Wrigley continued, reading prepared remarks. Such planning is vital to the decision-making process because the utility must undergo resilience adaptation or relocation prior to any future action regarding the fate of the roadway itself. Falmouth Director of Public Works Peter M. McConerty noted that permitting and relocating of the utilities under Surf Drive could take between 7 to 10 years. Goldstone said she appreciated the dose of reality the study provided. Town Manager Michael Renshaw added that while the town has more than $800 million in capital projects planned over the next 10 years, very little of that investment currently addresses coastal resilience. We're getting behind the curve, he said, calling for a coordinated town-wide effort to address Surf Drive and other vulnerable areas. That's the next step. With the Select Board's approval to move forward with a target approach, town staff will begin looking at funding sources, including state grants. The next headline, Developer upsizes 40B plan after town pushes back on Safe Harbor challenge, by Katie Nelson. Facing a legal fight with the town over its safe harbor status, the developer of the 40B housing project at 0 Sandwich Road told the butters on Thursday afternoon, December 4th, that he is abandoning his previously scaled-back plan and now intends to expand the proposal beyond what the town had urged. What neighbors expected to be a design conversation quickly unraveled as developer William R. Cumming announced that the 50-home plan he submitted in good faith is no longer on the table and that he will instead pursue a larger 60-unit project. The hour and 15-minute meeting was tense. Of the roughly 25 abutters in attendance, some walked out early Others attempted to adjourn the meeting altogether before it ended abruptly. Public hearings on Cummings' project and another proposed 40B development next door were recently suspended after both developers challenged the town's safe harbor status with the state. The Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities determined in both cases that Falmouth no longer qualifies for safe harbor. The town has appealed that determination to the State Housing Appeals Committee and paused its review of the two projects while the appeal is pending. Cumming told the abutters Thursday that his original proposal for the 14.63-acre parcel included 60 single-family homes as well as 10 duplex units intended for municipal employees. Mass Housing issued a project eligibility letter approving 60 homes on July 28, he said. After receiving feedback from the town, however, he reduced the plan to 50 single-family homes in 4 styles and eliminated the duplexes at the town's request to conserve additional land. The 50-unit plan, presented to the zoning board in October, included a mix of 2- and 3-bedroom homes with 10 affordable units, 70% of which were to have local preference. The affordable units were expected to range from $119,000 to $130,000. The 40 market-rate homes were projected to sell for $950,000 to $1 million. Cumming now says he's returning to the 60-unit plan to account for the significant costs and delays being imposed. He added that he would prefer to stick with a 50-unit version if litigation could be resolved before the end of the year, but he doubts that safe harbor issues will be settled that quickly. He also asserted that it's not a matter of if the town loses safe harbor, but when, saying, "We're here for one reason only. The town needs more affordable housing." Abutter Valerie J. Harding asked how many units in the expanded plan would be affordable. Cumming responded that 12 units, 20% of the project, would be deed-restricted affordable and would count toward the town's subsidized housing inventory. Harding also referenced a comment Cumming had made in the November 28th Enterprise about an announcement that would grab much attention. Cumming said he didn't know what she was referring to. At that point, tensions in the room rose. Some abutters called to adjourn the meeting. Several people began speaking over one another, and a few walked out. Trying to refocus the discussion, abutter Laura Innes asked whether individual home designs would change under the new plan and whether homes would be positioned more closely together. Another abutter, John Augusta, whose property borders the site, said the revised layout would increase the number of homes abutting his land from 8 to 10. Cumming replied that the project would average 4 units per acre and noted that other developments in town, such as Liberty Green on Main Street, have higher density. Augusta stood up and left the room saying, "There's no talking." Developer and resident Michael Galasso then spoke up, saying a meeting like this should have happened much earlier in the process. He suggested Cumming ask the project architects to explore ways to provide abutters with more of a buffer and consider their concerns. "I wish you would keep an open mind," Galasso said, "and see if there's an alternative that pleases everyone." Abutter Connor E. Ahern agreed and said that representatives from the adjacent project at 809 Sandwich Road should also be included in a joint meeting with neighbors. "There's still a lot of frustration, and it's come out in this meeting," he said. With little resolution, Cumming thanked those remaining for attending and ended the meeting, with no follow-up meetings planned. Committee floats idea for more car-free days on Main Street by Lynn Hutchinson. A hopeful early-stage discussion has begun among members of the town's Bike and Pedestrian Committee about what a more pedestrian and cyclist-centered Main Street could look like. While the idea is far from a formal proposal, committee members are exploring the possibility of holding more frequent car-free days along the roadway and someday pursuing a more permanent traffic-free downtown. Committee members Frieder Klein and Mitchell Flaherty introduced the discussion at the committee's monthly meeting on Wednesday night, December 3rd, suggesting closing Main Street to vehicles. The suggested closure is between the post office and the public library. Their proposal begins small, adding 2 additional vehicle-free days per year on top of what the town already hosts, such as the annual Falmouth Village Holiday Stroll in December. Klein and Flaherty said the closure could encourage more foot traffic, potentially boosting business for local shops and restaurants. "Local business," Flaherty said. "If they're thinking in their best interest, they should be for this." He noted that pedestrians are more likely to window shop and enter stores than passing drivers. Committee member Pamela Rothstein expressed strong support, pointing out that the idea has been raised multiple times in the past. She cited similar initiatives in other cities and towns, such as Boston's Newbury Street Sunday closure and Hyannis's Open Streets events in late spring and fall, as models that show potential benefits. That's given a little more traction to the possibility that this is something that could not only function and work, but could be beneficial, Rothstein said about more Massachusetts cities and towns embracing traffic-free streets. She emphasized that any closure should prioritize pedestrian and cyclist access, rather than turning the street into temporary event space. An art fair is not an open street. It's car-free, but it's cluttered, and not a functional road anymore, she said. Discussions are in the early stages, but the committee's already identified potential challenges. We might want to acknowledge this when we approach the town, that we're thinking this through, committee member Ellen Adams said about potential implications, including impact on the Cape Cod Regional Transit bus line that runs along Main Street. Adams suggested a detour for the bus line, routing it down Post Office Road and onto Catherine Lee Bates Road, with potential pickup and drop-off location near the parking lot behind Peg Noonan Park. Parking's another consideration. Whether temporary or more frequent, Main Street closures would impact about 110 on-street spaces. Klein said this potential result is not insignificant. It's only a fraction of the overall parking availability. A study conducted last fall covered downtown Falmouth from the Shining Sea Bikeway at Depot Avenue through Main Street to King Street, including the Lawrence School and Mullenhall Elementary School lots. It counted 1,662 publicly and privately owned spaces. Matthew Delaney, another committee member, added that if car-free days were expanded or made permanent, nearby streets like Catherine Lee Bates Road would likely need safety improvements to accommodate shifting traffic, especially since the library and Mullenhall School are located there. Committee Chairwoman Catherine Jansen encouraged Klein and Flaherty to develop metrics for evaluating the success of car-free days. The committee plans to begin discussions with the town and other stakeholders to better understand interest, feasibility, benefits, process, and potential limitations of such a proposal. Also on the front page of the Falmouth Enterprise of Friday, December 5th, Get Ready for a Weekend Packed with Holiday Celebrations by Lynn Hutchinson. And there is a photograph of the Morse Pond School Band marching, providing music during last year's Christmas parade. Holidays by the Sea will kick off the winter holiday season this weekend with a series of annual traditions. The festivities will include the hallmark lighting of the village green and the Falmouth Village Holiday Stroll, and culminate with a Christmas parade. Festivities begin Friday, December 5th with a Nobska Lighthouse Holiday Open House. This free event will include live music by the Brass Ring Ensemble, photo opportunities with Mrs. Claus, and coloring portraits of Nobska Light created by local artist Karen Rinaldo. Organizers have said the event is accessible by trolley only. There'll be no on-site parking during the event. The trolley will travel between the Candle House in Woods Hole Village and the Lighthouse. The event will run from 5 to 8 p.m. Before hopping on the trolley, attendees will be able to enjoy some holiday classics with the Solstice Singers. The sing-along will take place at Waterfront Park beginning at 5:30 p.m. Among other Falmouth Chamber of Commerce sponsored events, Seafaring Santa will make landfall at the Falmouth Harbor on Scranton Avenue at around 10:30 a.m. on Saturday, December 6th. The Falmouth High School Chorus will be providing music. Santa will then head to Marine Lodge, where he'll be stationed and ready to greet visitors until 3 p.m. At 3 p.m., the annual Guelph Run will take place. Young runners 12 and under will start and finish the half-mile course at the Run House at 227 Main Street. There'll be jingle bells for all. The run will be followed at 3:30 p.m. by the annual Jingle Jog 5K. Just like the children's run, this course will start and end at the Run House, 227 Main Street. Registration's required for both races, and while the 5K is sold out, registration for the Young People's Run remains open. The Falmouth Village Holiday Stroll will take place between 4 and 8 p.m. In addition to shopping at local businesses, entertainment will include carolers, live music, dance performances, Santa at Barbo's Furniture, and ice sculpture at Peg Noonan Park. The event will be capped off with Santa leading attendees along Main Street to the Village Green for the tradition of lighting of the Village Green, and that lighting will take place at 6 p.m. During Saturday afternoon and evening festivities, a parking ban will be in effect on Main Street from 1 to 9 p.m. Main Street from Palmer Avenue to Shore Street Extension will be closed to traffic. According to the police department, any vehicles parked on Main Street after 1 p.m. will be towed. Parking will be available at municipal lots, as well as at Lawrence School, Mullen Hall School, and Moores Pond School. The Steamship Authority parking lot at 286 Palmer Avenue will be open for free until 10 p.m. Another parking ban will be in effect on Main Street starting at 9 a.m. on Sunday for the Falmouth Christmas Parade. The parade, featuring decorated floats, marching bands, costume characters, and Santa Claus, will step off at noon from Dillingham Avenue and Davis Straits and head toward Main Street. My dog is very excited about all this. The procession will make its way down Main Street to the Village Green. This year's parade theme is Holiday Movie Night. Starting at 11:45 a.m., Main Street and Davis Straits will be closed until approximately 2 p.m., the police department said. Dillingham Avenue will also be closed beginning at 8 a.m. Other community holiday events include the Friends of the Falmouth Public Library annual holiday book sale, which will take place through Saturday. Used books and DVDs will be on sale at the library on Main Street. That sale is scheduled from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. through Saturday. The West Falmouth Library will join in the celebration with its own tree lighting and social gathering on Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. The Woods Hole Film Festival will screen A Cherry Pie Christmas in the Clapp Auditorium at the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole. Director John Stimpson will join in for a post-screening question and answer session. Ticket prices range from $10 to $20. During the Falmouth Village Holiday Stroll, consider stopping by St. Barnabas's Episcopal Church and First Congregational Church of Falmouth for their holiday markets. Both markets run from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturday. The next headline, East Falmouth woman, 68 years old, summits Mount Kilimanjaro for the second time, by Katie Nelson. Few hikers ever reach the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. Fewer still do it twice. East Falmouth's Robin Melivalin, 68, joined that elite group this September. Mount Kilimanjaro is the largest freestanding mountain in the world. It reaches an elevation of 19,341 feet above the sea level. Over a 2-year period, Melivalin trained her body to meet the challenge again. Her first climb was in 2013. Training to hike in high altitudes is necessary to diminish health risks, which include acute mountain sickness as well as cerebral and pulmonary edemas. With the Appalachian Mountain Club and on her own, Melivalin participated in hikes of mountains 4,000 feet in elevation in New Hampshire, as well as a hike in Colorado that reached 12,000 feet to prepare her lungs for Kilimanjaro. Locally, her training involved running up and down stairs and working with a trainer at the gym, too. Melivalin said during an interview with the Enterprise this week. Melivalin, Melavalin is the spelling, was the volunteer organizer of the trip. The group included 10 hikers, including another East Falmouth resident, Claudine H. Coz. Hikers from Michigan, Washington, Florida, Delaware, and Massachusetts made up the rest of the group. The expedition took 8 days and 7 nights. Melivalin had the difficult job of interviewing and vetting hikers who applied for the trip to make sure they could manage the ascent. Melivalin was the oldest in the group, but other hikers were in their 50s and 60s. She said trail guides have told her they prefer to work with older hikers because they don't overestimate their skills and they're typically more patient and careful than younger hikers. To complete the hike, you have to have grit, Melivalin said. As long as a hiker stays consistent with their training, regularly exercises, and maintains fitness, any willing and able person could meet the challenge. Along with a physical trek up the mountain, experiencing indigenous Maasai culture while in Tanzania was a highlight for Melivalin. Before she retired, Melivalin worked in global education with colleges and universities in Boston. She said she specifically requested female porters to accompany the hikers to support women in the male-dominated field of adventure hiking. Maasai porters told stories around the campfire each night, which Melavalan called Maasai TV, and shared traditional songs and meals with the hikers. The hikers were led up the mountain by a team of 42 porters. The porters were responsible for trail guidance, camping site setup and breakdown, including a dining room tent and a toilet tent. Porters did all the cooking and provided additional support, such as carrying oxygen tanks in case any hikers experienced an uncomfortable shortage of oxygen in the high altitudes. For an average of 5 to 7 hours each day, the group climbed about 2,000 feet of elevation. Over the course of the 44-mile hike, the hikers passed through 5 environmental zones, beginning in a jungle and ending in an Arctic zone. Melavalan said the views have changed on the mountain since the last time she made it to the summit 12 years ago. She noticed the glaciers on the mountain's peak have shrunk dramatically. The trail Melavalan took in 2013 was no longer open due to a rock slide, she said. On the way down, the group descended 9,000 feet in one day and 5,000 feet the next. With each step, Melavalan said she could breathe easier. While she doesn't think she'll make another trip up Kilimanjaro, Melavalan said she has a few big hiking trips planned for next year, including a 100-mile hike in April on the South Downs Way National Trail in England and a hike in Bhutan in October, where she will reach elevations of 12,000 feet. When not summiting the world's tallest peaks and adventuring through extreme climates, Melavalan spends her time diving with the old ladies against underwater garbage, cleaning up freshwater ponds. Moving inside the paper into the news section, GBH turns down invitation for public forum by Katie Nelson. A spokesperson from Boston-based public media company GBH said the company, including local public radio station CAI, will not participate in an open community forum in partnership with Atlantic Public Media, APM. Jay Allison, founder of CAI and APM, offered to facilitate a community forum intended to address listeners' concerns regarding the sale of CAI and APM's headquarters, the Captain Davis House in Woods Hole, and the station's move to a new recording, producing, and broadcasting space on Highfield Drive. At a ribbon-cutting ceremony at CAI's new space, CAI listeners stood outside the building with signs quietly protesting staff layoffs and what they called a lack of transparency and communication from GBH on the future of the station. Allison pitched the idea for a community forum in an open letter addressed to GBH, CAI, and listeners. Neighbors listening to neighbors is at the heart of public radio and local journalism. We are professional communicators, after all, so let's communicate in order to clear the air, have a transparent exchange, and lay out positive plans, Allison wrote. A spokesperson for GBH said community forums about future radio programming will be held in its gathering space, which is shared with Cape Symphony, but added that there will be no community forum regarding the move to Cape Symphony's campus or the sale of the Captain Davis House. In honor of CAI's 25th anniversary, we are working on an event series and will hold listening sessions across the Cape and Islands to talk about the stories we should cover and how we can continue to serve our audience, the spokesperson said. And another contentious topic here in the news section. The headline reads, "After a rocky RFP process, town secures a new operator for the Falmouth Country Club," by Lynn Hutchinson. After nearly 2 years of uncertainty over the future operator of Falmouth Country Club, the Select Boards approved a new 10-year lease with Morningstar Golf and Hospitality, a New Jersey-based firm that will take over management of the town-owned course on January 1st. The decision ends the town's 20-year relationship with Troon Indigo Sports, which has operated the Carriage Shop Road course since 2005. Troon's lease expires December 31st. The approval marks the conclusion of a long and at times difficult search for a new operator. Last fall, the town's initial request for proposals, an RFP, received no bids, which the assistant town manager attributed to the Select Board's stricter lease requirements, including higher rent and mandatory capital improvements. Notably, even the current operator chose not to submit a proposal at that time. A pared-down RFP issued this summer attracted 3 responses, including current operator Troon, as well as from Kemper Sports and Morningstar. A review committee composed of Golf Advisory Committee Chairman Carrie Murphy, Golf Advisory Committee member and golf industry professional Brian Arthur, retired golf professional Glenn Kelly, Assistant Town Manager Peter Johnson-Staub, and Finance Director Laura Citrin evaluated the proposals. Following interviews, the committee ranked Morningstar's non-price proposal highest. During Monday's Select Board meeting, Johnson-Staub noted that Troon and Kemper were considered the big dogs in golf management in the eastern part of the country, but the committee favored Morningstar because of its smaller size and the hands-on involvement of its principals. The company's intimate direct knowledge with Massachusetts procurement laws was also seen as an advantage, reducing some of the administrative workload for town staff. Johnson-Staub said Morningstar's proposal was the most advantageous. Under the lease agreement, Morningstar will pay the town $500,000 annually as base rent, plus 50% of any operational revenue above $2 million. The town will also receive 10% of food, beverage, and merchandise sales above $300,000. Even if golf course revenues fall 15% and then grow by only 1% annually, the town is projected to receive more than $620,000 needed for its annual debt payments associated with the acquisition of the property in 2005. According to town calculations, if revenues grow 3% per year, the town's lease income could rise from about $975,000 in year 1 to $1.4 million by year 10. In an email sent to Town Manager Michael Renshaw, which accompanied the review committee's recommendation, Johnson-Staub described an estimate of total revenue the town will receive under a 10-year contract. Under the low-growth forecast, the town could receive an estimated $8.66 million, 95% of 2024 actual revenue growing 1% annually, while a modest growth projects $12.27 million. That's 110% of 2024 revenue growing 3% annually during the 10-year agreement. With the announcement that the Cape Club golf course in Falmouth is transitioning from a semi-private daily fee golf course to a private membership course in 2026, and the potential conversion of the Cape Cod Country Club to a solar development, which is what I thought this story was about. That's why I introduced it as an ongoing topic. There is reason to be optimistic about the prospects for continued revenue growth at the Falmouth Country Club, Johnson-Staub stated in the email. Morningstar brings experience managing golf properties in the Cape and Islands region, including Maya Comet Golf Club and the 9-hole Sconset Golf Club on Nantucket. Residents will also benefit from the change in management, as Morningstar is committed to a 20% discount on daily play and annual passes, double the RFP's minimum requirement. Morningstar has informed the town it created a separate company to manage the Falmouth Country Club lease. After the town manager approved moving forward, Morningstar established Soundview Golf, LLC, as the lease's tenant. The town also received a personal guarantee letter from Matthew Falvin, owner of Morningstar. Johnson-Staub said town councils reviewed the arrangement and approved the lease, confirming that leasing the property to Soundview Golf, LLC is legally proper. Board Chairman Robert Mascali expressed satisfaction with the outcome. "This is a good result, much better than last year at this time," Mascali said. "I think it's a good deal for the town. Looks like the operator fits well within what this town wants." We're a few minutes past the midway portion of our reading. Regular listeners are aware, I'm sure. That's when we move to a different kind of local news, which is the obituaries, death notices, and memorials. In today's Falmouth Enterprise of Friday, December 5th, the first obituary is of Linda E. Davis of Falmouth, who passed at the age of 88 on November 19th. She was predeceased by her husband. Services were held on November 24th. The next obituary is of Nancy S. DeCosta of East Falmouth, who passed on November 22nd at the age of 84. She was predeceased by her husband of 54 years, Thomas DeCosta. A burial will be held on Wednesday, December 10th, at 9:30 a.m. at St. Anthony's Cemetery in East Falmouth. The next obituary is of Samuel McMurtry, Jr. of Brookline, a U.S. Navy veteran, who passed on November 17th at the age of 87. Thank you, Mr. McMurtry, for your service. He leaves his wife, Elizabeth Molodovsky, and many family and friends. A commemoration of his life is planned for summer of 2026 in Falmouth. The next obituary is of Anne Marie Bento of Rohnert Park, California, formerly of Falmouth, who passed on October 25th at the age of 72. A funeral service will be held at St. Anthony's Catholic Church in East Falmouth. Details will be announced in the new year. A celebration of life was held on December 2nd in Cotati, California. The next obituary is of Lorette C. Goodwin of Swansea, New Hampshire, formerly of Falmouth, who passed at the age of 84 on November 19th. She was predeceased by her husband, Gary Goodwin of Muncie, Indiana. Services and burial will be private. The next obituary is of Carolyn A. Tuhig, who passed on November 29th. She was born April 10th of 1936, attended St. Mary's Academy in Dover, and graduated in 1956. Friends and family are invited to attend a funeral mass held at St. Patrick's Church, located at 511 Main Street in Falmouth on Saturday, December 6th at 10 a.m. The interment services will be private. Donations may be made in Carolyn's memory to the Falmouth Service Center at 611 Gifford Street in Falmouth. The next obituary is of Elaine M. Alves of East Falmouth, who at the age of 80 passed peacefully at home surrounded by her loving family on November 28th. She was the beloved wife of Napoleon Alves Jr. of 62 years and was born in Falmouth, graduating from Falmouth Public Schools. A visitation will be held at Chapman Funerals and Cremations at 475 Main Street in Falmouth on Thursday, December 11th from 4 to 7 p.m. A funeral mass will be held in St. Anthony's Church, 167 East Falmouth Highway in East Falmouth on Friday, December 12th at 11 a.m., with burial to follow in St. Anthony's Cemetery. The following residents, former residents, or family of residents of Bourne, Mashpee, and Sandwich recently died. Sean K. Budd, 56 of Sandwich, died November 20th. Raymond J. Cormier, 91 of Sandwich, died December 2nd. Margaret A. Dutch, 65 of Bourne, died November 26th. Frederick A. Grimshaw, Jr., 82 of Mashpee, died November 26th. Isolde B. Hoffman, 79 of Sandwich, died December 1st. William J. Lutz, Jr., 88 of Sandwich, died November 11th. Sarah E. Polito, 79 of Bourne, died November 14th. And Stephen M. Waterhouse, 61 of Western Massachusetts, died on October 26th. And that concludes the obituaries, death notices, and memorials listed in the Falmouth Enterprise for Friday, December 5th. Returning to the news section, Falmouth to rename Green Pond Bridge in honor of veterans with trauma-related injuries by Lynn Hutchinson. Green Pond Bridge in East Falmouth will soon bear a new name in honor of the late U.S. Army Sergeant Joshua Tipton and in recognition of other Falmouth service members who suffer from trauma-related injuries that aren't visible or immediately detectable. The Air Force Wounded Warrior Program defines these injuries as cognitive, emotional, or behavioral conditions that result from trauma or serious adverse life events. Examples include major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and traumatic brain injury. Tipton, who grew up in Falmouth and went through the Falmouth public school system, enlisted in the Army and completed basic training shortly after graduating from Falmouth High. For 6 years, he served in the Combat Arms Readiness Brigade as a tanker. After his exit from active duty, he continued his commitment to the country by serving in the U.S. Army Reserve. On July 5th of 2023, Tipton died by suicide. In a letter to the Select Board from Tipton's sister, Amanda Braga Tipton, petitioning to rename Green Pond Bridge, Braga Tipton said that her brother's death was not what she wanted to highlight, but rather an incredible life lived. During the December 1st Select Board meeting, Braga Tipton described her brother's character through a story of when he was 8 years old observing D-Day and Pearl Harbor Day, where he threw flowers off the Green Pond Bridge and held a moment of silence with family members. He was before his time, Braga Tipton said. That's the type of heart he carried from childhood until it stopped beating. Select Board member Colin Reed, who was appointed in July to seek input from town departments and committees, emphasized the importance of honoring Tipton in a larger context of other community members who have served in the military and suffer from injuries that might not be visible. The accolades and personal references, his story speaks for itself, Reed relayed to the rest of the board. What's not obvious is the invisible wounds. Unlike visible wounds, invisible injuries can go undetected for years, Reed explained. I believe this is going to improve awareness. It can reduce stigma and provide support and resources to those affected, Reed said. Select Board member Douglas Brown took a moment to remember Joe Vidal, a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve who he said died at the bridge. There's a reason to think about more than Josh, Brown said. Josh was an important member of our community, but there are others too. The whole board in Braga-Tipton supported a name change that honors both Tipton and the greater veteran community. An exact name hasn't been determined, but the town, in collaboration with the Veterans Council, aims to formalize a name by Memorial Day. For Braga-Tipton, the bridge is a meaningful symbol. A bridge, literally and metaphorically, is positioned to bring someone from one place to another place, Braga-Tipton said. In his honor, Braga-Tipton founded Josh's Boots, Inc., a nonprofit organization aimed at bringing suicide prevention resources to veterans and first responders, as well as supporting families impacted by suicide. As an immediate family member who's walking through it, Braga-Tipton said to the Select Board, I don't say this in arrogance, but it takes one to know one, so I know what the families are needing. From the Enterprise's editorial board, the headline reads, Big Questions About Holtec's Assurances. As Holtec International continues decommissioning the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station, residents across the region face risks they didn't choose. The decisions that this multi-billion-dollar corporation is making at Pilgrim affect the air we all breathe and the waters that define our communities. A recent article in the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists paints a disturbing picture of Holtec, a company with a pattern of ambitious promises, incomplete follow-through, and repeated regulatory trouble. That history matters because Holtec is now asking all of us to trust that ongoing radioactive releases at Pilgrim pose no threat. Public debate has focused heavily on Holtec's proposal to dump more than 800,000 gallons of irradiated wastewater into Cape Cod Bay. A state hearing officer has recommended denying Holtec's permit request, a decision the company is expected to challenge if upheld by the Department of Environmental Protection. But a quieter danger is happening right now. The water, sitting in Pilgrim's spent fuel pool, is evaporating into the air, and it's dispersing over whatever communities the wind carries it toward. For Upper Cape residents, those winds often blow our way. Last week, we reported that State Senator Dylan Fernandez, along with Representatives Michelle Badger and Hadley Luddy, have filed legislation to temporarily halt all airborne radioactive discharges until the DEP and the Department of Public Health can conduct a full public health study. Unlike earlier bills focused solely on water dumping, this proposal targets every route by which radiation might escape the site. Fernandez argues that we don't have adequate data on prevailing winds or where radioactive isotopes might fall once airborne. Until those questions are answered, the region shouldn't be expected to accept ongoing releases, intentional or otherwise. Holtec's response has been dismissive. Spokesman Patrick O'Brien called the legislation unnecessary and accused critics of trying to scare the public. But the evaporating water contains tritium, a radioactive isotope linked to elevated cancer risk. Winter heating near the pool might even be accelerating evaporation. We deserve scientific clarity, not a corporate PR campaign. The Bulletin's article, printed in November, details some of Holtec's past questionable practices. The Bulletin reports that the company has faced radiation safety violations, quality control failures in spent fuel transport, security lapses, and a lingering bribery allegation. These failures should matter deeply to communities surrounding Pilgrim because Holtec is now responsible for decisions that directly shape our environmental and public health future. Holtec's acquisition of shuttered plants, including Pilgrim, Indian Point, and Palisades, comes with control of each project's multi-billion-dollar decommissioning trust funds. If Holtec finishes under budget, it pockets the remaining funds. When we hear Holtec say radioactive releases are perfectly safe, we need to remember that its legal and financial incentives place speed and cost saving above community protection. Environmental advocate Diane Turco of Cape Downwinders captures the sentiment shared across the region. Residents are too often dismissed as fearmongers, while the company repeats the same reassurances so many times that lingering uncertainties are glossed over. But asking for data is not fearmongering. Wanting to understand what's entering our air is not alarmism. It's the responsible thing to do. The Select Board met this week, and in the news section the headline reads, Select Board backs creation of liquor license for arts and culture venues, by Lynn Hutchinson. The Select Board voted on Monday, December 1st, to create a new general on-premises arts and culture alcohol license that would give galleries, museums, and performance venues an annual licensing option to serve alcohol at public events, something many have struggled to do under recent state regulatory changes. The new license establishes two categories: all alcoholic beverages and wine and malt beverages. The new licenses will allow qualified arts and culture venues to sell alcohol on a limited weekly schedule. Eligible applicants include galleries and exhibition halls displaying visual art, cultural venues hosting theater, dance, or musical performances, and museums, libraries, and historic buildings that feature artistic, historic, or scientific exhibits. Under the new regulation, license holders may serve alcohol either 3 days a week or up to 15 hours per week, whichever is greater. The Select Board can grant additional hours at its discretion. This action comes in response to a shift in state policy, which the Board and Town Council described as a big step back and kind of shocking. This past summer, the Massachusetts ABC Commission, Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission, issued an advisory redefining the scope of caterers' licenses. The Commission's interpretation restricts catering companies from offering alcohol services at any public event, leaving arts and cultural organizations responsible for getting licenses and pouring drinks. The only remaining alternative for organizations has been the special one-day license, which is capped at 30 licenses per year. This forces groups to choose between limiting their programming or pursuing a year-round license that restaurants typically apply for, which neither fits their operations nor their budgets. Currently, a one-day alcohol license costs $25 per event, totaling $750 annually, not including filing fees. In contrast, under this new license, the annual fee for a wine and malt license would be $500 and $750 for an all-alcohol license. During the Select Board meeting, Town Council Maura O'Keefe explained that the regulation's subsection outlining permitted hours was crafted so that it was very clear that the license was intended to be used by license holders where the service of alcohol is not the focus of their business. Still, several arts organizations sought clarification. Tara Keefe Burke, co-executive director of Highfield Hall, asked whether the town's new license would help address issues created by the state's new 12C caterer license regulation. Highfield, she said, has always used an outside catering company for its alcohol service. But under the ABCC's updated interpretation, the organization itself must now hold the necessary license and provide trained staff as pourers and servers. O'Keefe emphasized that the town has no authority to modify state-level licensing, but the new regulation would at least ease the financial and administrative pressure caused by the reliance on one-day licenses. When asked by the Select Board Chairman if there's been any pushback to the new interpretation of the state regulation, O'Keefe said she was unaware of any organized pushback from other towns or cultural institutions. Burke expressed interest in advocating for statewide changes, but said she just doesn't want any pushback coming towards Highfield. Representatives from the College Light Opera Company, known as CLOC, also attended the meeting. Speaking for the organization, John B. Rest explained that CLOC stages 9 shows in 9 weeks each summer with 6 performances weekly. The company can operate within the proposed 12-hour limit, he said, but special events, such as fundraisers, could push the institution over the cap. He asked how organizations would request additional operating hours. O'Keefe said that within the application, applicants can seek conditional allowances for expanded hours, subject to Select Board discretion. Earlier in the discussion, Select Board member Jack Richardson floated the idea of increasing the weekly cap from 12 to 20 hours in order to eliminate the need for such conditional allowances. However, Select Board Chairman Robert Muscali and Vice Chairwoman Heather Goldstone thought Richardson's proposed amendment was a step too far. As a compromise, the Select Board approved the new license as proposed, while amending it to expand the weekly operating cap from 12 to 15 hours. The concept of an arts and culture license has been under discussion since October, when the Select Board first began exploring ways to help cultural institutions adapt to the ABCC's advisory. Also from the Select Board, the headline reads, Select Board hears proposed fiscal year 2027 budget plan, warned of future fiscal pressure, by Lynn Hutchinson. The town's proposed budget for fiscal year 2027 is estimated to be $191.7 million. Operating expenses are expected to increase by about 5.8% from the previous fiscal year. While the town will be able to maintain core services without requiring a Proposition 2.5 override, future 5-year projections paint a gloomy and doomy picture. The proposed operating budget totals $183.8 million. Education remains the largest driver of expenditures, with Falmouth Public Schools and Upper Cape Tech accounting for nearly $70 million combined. This is about a 5.8% increase from the previous year that will cover rising special ed and safety costs. Personnel costs are projected to rise by 5.4%, while employee benefits will increase by 4.7%. Debt service is expected to climb nearly 9%. Besides schools and personal services, town and schools benefits like health insurance and retirement contributions make up the next largest portion of operating expenditures at just over $34.5 million. Among other expenses, the town will continue its annual $950,000 contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund, adding 2 additional staff for dispatch services and adding a part-time custodial staff for the Falmouth Senior Center during evening meetings and extended hours. On the revenue side, property taxes, which make up 72% of all funding, are projected at $138.8 million. The town's expecting to raise $900,000 in new growth from property taxes. Of the $138,829,142 in property tax revenue, $10,423,172 is from debt exclusions. Local receipts and state revenue make up almost 26% of the proposed revenue. To balance the fiscal year 27 budget without requiring an override, the town is utilizing several levers, one of which is to utilize $1.2 million of its $1.5 million excess levy capacity, Town Manager Michael Renshaw said. Renshaw added, based on state tax calculation resources, that using excess levy capacity would lead to an average property tax increase of $48. Additionally, department requests were reduced by $2,087,105, most of which were in personnel requests. Renshaw also explained that the town will increase its use of local receipts from the typical 80 to 85% to ensure the budget's balanced. The use of these levers will result in less free cash available for the fiscal year 27 capital budget and other emergency needs. It will increase pressure on operations and staff due to increased responsibilities without expanding staffing, and notably, future budgets will require future overrides, service reductions, or the creation of new service fees, he said. The town's 5-year projection shows growing deficits beginning in fiscal year 28, starting with a $3 million shortfall and widening to nearly $14.6 million by fiscal year 30, Renshaw said. It's not a pretty picture, unfortunately, Renshaw said. Renshaw noted that part of the projected gap stems from the town's effort to offer competitive wages and benefits in order to remain an employer of choice. He spoke on the need to be transparent with residents and explain kind of the situation we're in. Fiscal year 27 begins July 1st of 2026. And our final story in the Falmouth Enterprise of Friday, December 5th, the headline reads, "Man sentenced to life without parole for fatal stabbing in Falmouth." A Barnstable Superior Court judge has sentenced Tishawn K. Miller, 44 years old, of East Bridgewater, to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his role in the 2022 stabbing death of Douglas Rose in Falmouth. A jury convicted Miller on November 20th of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and daytime breaking and entering for a felony following a 3-week trial. Prosecutors said the killing occurred on September 22nd of 2022. After Rose allegedly stole drugs from Kimberly A. McCarthy. According to evidence presented in court, McCarthy drove Miller, Chari Rainey, and Vincent Purdy to 250 Davisville Road in East Falmouth to confront Rose. Rainey broke into the home and chased Rose outside and toward Miller, who grabbed him. Prosecutors said Miller and Rainey then repeatedly stabbed Rose before fleeing with McCarthy. Investigators used cell site location data to place Miller's and Rainey's phones near both McCarthy's home and the crime scene. A knife recovered nearby contained DNA from both Miller and the victim. Judge Greg J. Pasquale imposed the life sentence on Tuesday. The case was investigated by the Falmouth Police Department and the Massachusetts State Police Detectives Unit, which is assigned to the Cape and Islands District Attorney's Office. It was prosecuted by Assistant District Attorneys Courtney Lee Scalise and Kevin Burke, with support from Victim Witness Assistant Deborah McCoy. Rainey, who's also charged with murder, is scheduled to go on trial on March 30th. And if you missed any of the information that we shared in our reading today, you can always go to audiblelocalledger.org and click on the Listen tab. It's a fully disability-compliant website. And if you're on that Listen tab, All Reads to the Blind, click on that and you'll find 150 of our readings in chronological order. So you'll be able to find this pretty easily. And you can catch up on anything you might have missed. We also keep a wide variety of periodicals and literature up there for your listening pleasure, as well as our shopping guides, which go up on Saturday at noon and Sunday at 11. This is your reader, Eric, saying be well, be safe, look after each other, and remember our veterans, especially those we've lost recently. Bye for now.